Hi, I'm Israa. I'm the author of the upcoming book Toxic Productivity that's out November 19th. I'm a therapist and a writer and a speaker, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi, everyone. On this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we share a conversation with Israa Nasir, author of the new book, Toxic Productivity. Stay tuned. So, as you're enjoying this and in the spirit of the conversation you're about to hear in this episode, I hope that listening or watching is a meaningful part of your day and serves kind of like an additive supplement to your purpose and value. I know it's a tall order, but listening to these can come at the cost of time and effort, and so I'm greatly appreciative to you for engaging with me on Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, and for sharing this with your friends and family. And of course, if you are enjoying these, please take a moment to share a kind rating and submit a written review wherever you're getting this right now. So again, in our own personal quest for fulfillment and seeking achievement, we can sometimes find ourselves in spaces where we take on too much, where we don't maintain boundaries, and where we live on this constant precipice of burnout. In fact, as we seek more vehicles and venues to strive and advance and do more, the ambition and drive and joy can be up against the emotional hurdles of shame, guilt, and perfectionism, especially in an environment where hustle culture and social media have currencies and markers that blur our boundaries and make it easy to fall prey to poor self-esteem from an obsession with busyness. So it was truly great to catch up with Israa Nasir, therapist, speaker, and founder of the digital mental health brand Well Guide. Israa was born in Pakistan and raised in Saudi Arabia and Toronto before moving to New York. She's a psychotherapist and content creator whose intersectional cultural and professional background serve as fertile ground to focus on evidence-based mental and emotional health and empowering individuals and communities along the way. Her new book is titled Toxic Productivity, where Israa aims to unmask the hidden roots of hustle culture and dismantle the myth that doing more makes you more worthy. It's a guide with exercises, personal insights, and storytelling aimed at understanding what drives your toxic productivity habits and how to undo them in order to lead a more meaningful life. Now, I'm a big fan of professor and author Cal Newport, who called Isra's book a powerful manifesto for reclaiming the idea of productivity, transforming it from something toxic to nourishing. Israa and I chatted about her background and setting boundaries, about the role of pride and ambition in all of this, and about even the arduous exercise of writing the book within the context of being productive. But we started out by discussing if any of her own daily habits were essential to building a healthy productivity.
Yeah, so recently in the last 3 years, something I've developed, and I've realized that it became a powerful game changer for the quality of my day, is really practicing something called a slow morning. And
Mm.
when we think about slow mornings, a lot of times we think about these long stretches of time where we're waking up at the crack of dawn and doing an hour of journaling, an hour of meditating. And those things can be helpful for some people. It's just not the most realistic thing for me. But that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that we can't have those things. So a slow morning has become extremely non negotiable for me. And that really all that means is I try to wake up between 20 to 30 minutes before I'm supposed to get whatever
Yeah.
done. And so I wake up slowly, I put on music while I'm, brushing my teeth, doing my skincare, and then I make breakfast and coffee and I sit and I have that without a screen, without my emails, without my going on social media. So I think that just that's it. Like I'm not actually doing anything else that's known as like, the mindful meditation techniques. I'm not doing that in the morning because
Sure.
I can't. That's just not part of it's just not realistic for me. But I am
Yeah.
just the very act of sitting and paying attention to my coffee and my breakfast and just being still, that itself is very rejuvenating. And that is honestly a non-negotiable to me now. Even if I have to wake up super early for, let's say, an airport, I'll still wake up 20 minutes before the time that
Yeah.
I have to and do the thing. So It's been really great.
As someone who misses flights once every 13 years,
Oh, okay.
I probably should employ that a little bit more,
Yeah.
especially on, and you know, I mean, it's there's a time based aspect to it, but I appreciate what you just said about the stillness aspect to it,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's really the decluttering of things that you know both technology and
Mhm.
tasks
Mhm.
can put in front of you, and
Yeah.
it sounds like is this something that you know for you required? I know for me it would require practice. Is this something that for you just sort of has built up that iterative muscle memory, if you will, particularly as you've done it, you know, so frequently now?
No, I say that because
Huh.
I'm actually not doing anything. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like I didn't need to build in a habit. I'm actually doing nothing if you really
Mm.
think about it, right? So like I wake up and I brush my teeth and do all the things, then I'm just sitting. And so I am a content creator. I create mental health education pieces for social media, and you're supposed to kind of post first thing in the morning because people are opening up their phones first thing in the morning. And that used to really start my day off poorly, just getting up and hitting posts or whatever. So you leveraging technology to schedule these posts to go out automatically has really been helpful. So I think that's one thing that I shifted. I started searching
Mm.
around to see what I can leverage to get the auto posts out so I don't have to open the apps. But I didn't really have to build in a practice. It was really just waking up 15 minutes early, then pushing it to 20, then pushing it to 25, and then
Yeah.
now it's 30 minutes.
I'm curious also, sounds like that energizes you in a way, right? Because you're doing nothing.
Mhm.
I'm curious where you draw your energy from in that sense also. Are you someone who draws energy from people around you or actually from that stillness from within yourself? You know, I know some people, you know, does this make you, if you're someone who's an extrovert or an introvert, does it make you toggle back and forth between conversations or even the solace of that quiet reflection in a way?
As a very classic Libra, I'm in the middle. So I'm neither an extrovert nor an introvert. I'm something that's known as an ambivert, which
Yeah.
means that depending on the situation, I can feel very energized by people around me, or I can find that depleting and I need time on my own. One thing is for sure about me is I certainly need to have solo time at least once a week where I'm just on my own, and I find that very, very rejuvenating. And that means I'm not on social media either. So when I'm with myself, I'm just with myself. Sometimes just
Mm,
listening to music, going for a walk. I often go on bi-weekly dinner dates with myself or lunch dates with myself. So I think
yeah.
as a whole, I do find some solo time to be rejuvenating, but I also need to be around people to kind of feel a little bit more energized depending on the situation. But starting your morning, at least for me, starting my day from a place of stillness really just gives me a sense of grounding. More than
Mm,
energy, it gives me a sense of grounding and rootedness so that I'm not overwhelmed. I've
yeah.
learned through the years that I'm somebody who can become very easily overwhelmed. It's kind of sometimes it's kind of like a bag of marbles has exploded and everything is just going everywhere. My not to be very jargony, but my nervous system is very dysregulated often because I'm doing so many things. And it's kind of this like toxic productivity mindset, which is like I'm just trying to do everything all the time
Yeah.
for everyone. And so this idea of like a slow morning just kind of happened by chance. But once I started feeling the benefits of it, I became more intentional about it.
There are people whose lives are intertwined with partnerships and spouses and significant others and whatnot. And how do you tell people to approach those slow mornings when their partners or their families' mornings are anything but slow?
Yeah. So, especially if you have kids, I think it's very challenging. I don't have
Yeah.
children, but I was a child before, and I remember that the chaos of the morning.
Right.
It's very challenging. And my partner, he is like a true extrovert. Like,
Yeah.
there could not be more of an extrovert than him, so we're very different in that way. And then, if you think about the biology of between, biological males and females, and you probably know this more as a medical professional, like we're waking up with different hormones. Like men are waking up at their
Mm,
peak, and like women are they kind of go through the cycle over 30 days, right? And so I
Yeah.
think just kind of being in touch with your own body's rhythm is really important. Because a slow morning works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. So the
Right.
point I really like to hone in on is find the thing that works for you in your circumstance. So as a therapist, that's something I really help people feel empowered in. If you have children and your mornings are chaotic, think about what needs to change to just shift one aspect of your morning. And a lot of
Mm,
times, good mornings are made the night before. So, can you prep some stuff? Can you empower your children to prep their outfits the night before? Small things
right.
like leaving the socks out with the shoes the night before so you're not scrummaging for them in the morning. That's kind of how I built up like a gym practice is I would really struggle to get my life together to get put gym clothes on in the morning. So I just lay them out the night before the mornings I have to go to the gym in the morning. So it's just kind of like shifting small habits wherever you
Yeah.
can. Because making a full routine change, if you have a partner, if you have children, if you have like parents you're caring for, that's like it feels impossible. So if you can
Right.
just shift small things to enable yourself to start moving towards the ideal state, you're not going to get to the ideal state right away. So even for me, I started off with waking up only 15 minutes earlier, right? And
Yeah.
still just being able to listen to music and do my skincare, but not but still eat breakfast while doing my emails. And then I just
Yeah.
expanded it by 5 minutes and 5 minutes. And it took like 3, 4 months. It didn't just happen. It's hard to break habits, even though they seem very small.
And that's what I meant by the iterative practice, where you
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
like you get to a steady state and
Yeah.
you build up this kind of cachet of
Mhm,
success. And
mhm.
a lot of what you're talking about, I mean, at least in my house, the pre prep of what you're talking about involves, does the car have gas in it for my children, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that can be but meal prep is what makes meals successful.
yeah.
So planning ahead of time and all those things are wonderful. You mentioned the ability to be still, especially to quiet down that kind of toxic productivity, spin that's going on in your head often. And I'm curious how you particularly stay driven while also quieting those inner voices, right? Whether that's an inner critic, it's an inner guide that's constantly telling you to achieve or do something, or get that thing done today. How do you maintain that kind of drive and ambition while also remaining still and quieting those voices?
That's a really good question. And it's one that I explore in detail in the book. And the reason it even came about is because of my own personal experience with this. So, this is something that I definitely struggled with a lot, especially in my 20s, of seeing rest as the enemy to progress, seeing taking breaks as antithetical to success. And
Mm,
that's the inner critic voice that's constantly telling you to keep moving. And the journey that I really had to take that started off with just doing research on this topic because I was trying to understand how I can break these habits myself is
yeah.
really reframing and actually even to the end point is to redefine productivity to include rest and stillness in it, but that's a really big ask at the upfront. So starting off with just kind of like reframing those inner critical thoughts to seeing how you can transform them into something more helpful. So if I am sitting and the thoughts begin, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like 8:50, like, "You should have started already, you should have started already." It's the
Right.
should statements.
Yeah.
I have to really stop myself now and have a conversation with myself and say things like that are validating. So, it's okay if it's 8:50, you're meant to start at 9 anyway, right?
Mm.
Or things like that are completely reframing as, "If you don't finish this well right now, you're going to be stressed the rest of the day. Then you're gonna get really tired in the afternoon, you have a long day." Like, you're actually talking
Oh
through.
yeah. By the way, are
Yeah,
those reminders? Because some people have a difficult time having that conversation with themselves. They need coaches, they need
yeah.
visuals, they need
Mhm,
post-its someplace like
mhm,
slow down. It's 8:50,
mhm.
you're okay, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
So mine is just kind of like a mental thing because I think as a child I was very like imaginative play was a very big thing for me. So I think it's just
Yeah.
like a natural skill that I have that I can kind of mentally talk myself through it. However,
Yep.
I think for people who are more visual, having like something that I recommend people do is when you're actually in a good state of mind, open up a notes in your note app. And when you're in that positive or healthy or balanced state of mind, write down the things that are going to be helpful to you. Trying to think
Mm,
of stuff when you're in a crisis is very unhelpful because it doesn't usually happen. So you can keep it in
right.
your notes app. You can have visual reminders. I have a friend who has, you can download this app that changes the wallpaper of your phone to various
Mm,
affirmations on a time clock, like every 20 minutes it shifts to a new affirmation, and it's just on your desk, on your wallpaper, so you're not actually getting a notification for it because we have notification
yeah.
fatigue. So like trying to get creative in ways like that is really helpful. Having a set place where you have your breakfast or your coffee, again, like the more you ritualize it, the less powerful the inner critic becomes. So
Mm,
in the beginning you
yeah.
might need the reminders, but eventually it's something that becomes just a part of the way you're thinking.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with therapist, speaker, and author Israa Nasir. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, Trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi everyone, this is Chef Vikas Khanna. I am a chef, I am an author, filmmaker, documentarian, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tam France.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal.
Hi, my name is Richa Morjani, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with author of the new book, Toxic Productivity, Israa Nasir. Has that been the experience for you where as you have begun to ritualize this and especially with surprises, right? I mean, transitions.
Mm,
Younger children go through this where they find it really difficult to navigate through transitions or the surprise that comes by because the ritual gets broken.
yeah.
So, when you're trying to quiet those voices a little bit and quiet that critic in you, when there are surprises or shocks to the system, how do you sort of brace for that? Does that also require a lot of kind of forethought and practice and skill?
So something I laugh about with my sister a lot is, so I'm big on rituals, right? But the
Yeah.
problem with rituals is if one is disrupted, it's kind of like a domino effect on the day, and you're just
Right.
like, why do I even have rituals? Because it
Yeah.
feels limiting, but it's actually not. So one important part of building healthy habits, whatever eating well, sleeping better, whatever it is, like not using your phone, is to bake in a contingency plan. And
Mm,
that's part of building a ritual. That's part of, and of course, when you work with children, you have to adapt it in a way that's developmentally appropriate. And
right.
my experience with children is very, very limited. But with adults, is you, when you plan for it, when you're sitting it down and you're thinking about how you want to build in this new habit, you are thinking about things that are disruptive, like vacations, right?
Right.
Like stressful periods at work. Some people, due to their professions, they already know seasons that are very busy, like accountants, for example, right? Or
Yeah.
dentists, like the end of the year is really busy for dentists because people are trying to use up their benefits. And so
Yep.
knowing the baseline of your life is really important when you think about building new habits. And rituals are really powerful because they are anchoring, right? You
Mm,
recognize that I have these anchor points in my day, in my week, that will activate me into doing these things. And when the rituals are disrupted, my recommendation, and this is something I practice, is to compress the ritual. So if you
mm,
can't do 100% of the whole thing that day, just do 20%. That's okay. So
yeah.
something I struggle with a lot is regularly like exercising at the gym. I can go to classes, Pilates and yoga, like that's great, but that weight training piece is very hard for me because I
Sure.
just was not a very athletic person as a young child. And so when I don't have the solid 60 minutes to work out, I'll just take the workouts that my trainer has given me and do it for 30 minutes.
Hmm.
And I even asked her, I was like, hey, can you just create two workouts for me? One is at 160, one is 30, because at least I can get some done. So when we think
Yeah.
about positive habits, we don't want to get into this like 0, 1 binary mindset. Just even if you can do 80%, you can do 20%, do what you can for that day, and it's still a win.
I love how that's kind of baked into everything, right? That the ritual doesn't have to be a 100%
Mhm.
0 versus 1 binary, but being able to get graduated results is also, super beneficial.
Mhm.
And of course, us as South Asians, we're no strangers to ritualization of things.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, for someone like you and your own sort of formative background, growing up in multiple cultures with lots of, having this kind of South Asian cultural backdrop and heritage, was your cultural background at all an accelerator to tackling and addressing this issue of toxic productivity in a way? Did that sort of tee up this conversation for you?
That is such an interesting question. You know, I think certain aspects of toxic productivity, and this is really just an like the output of the way my family operates. The foundation for this kind of like toxic level of high achievement and needing to always be optimizing, and so I think that does definitely come from my family background. And when I think about like the mornings and the chaotic mornings and like the false sense of urgency, I think a lot of that does come from the foundation of my parents, specifically more my mom. My dad is a little bit more chill, and this is not a knock on them. I love them, and I honestly
Sure,
had a very
sure. And
perfect.
by the way, the immigrant story
Yeah.
probably resonates for a lot of people,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. That's the
Yeah,
thing, like as immigrants, you kind of are in survival mode, right? So it's not even like
yeah,
something that my parents were intentionally maliciously doing. It's the thing that helped them get out of survival into thriving.
yeah,
So, my parents were caught up in the 1971 war between Bangladesh and Pakistan. So they were displaced in that war as a minority. And so that already starts you at survival mode, right? That starts you at
sure.
this false sense of urgency. And I think this is a story a lot of South Asians diaspora adults can really identify with because we have this intergenerational component of trauma. Our grandparents lived the
Yeah,
partition, they passed down that nervous system dysregulation, the scarcity mindset, the I need to do everything now. They pass it to their
right.
kids who are our parents. And then our parents pass it to us because we then immigrated from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Afghanistan to
Yeah,
the Middle East or to North America or Europe. And then they had to start all over again, right? And so there is
yep,
this compounding effect in immigrant experiences that really sets the stage for toxic productivity to take hold. And then
yeah,
you layer that on with the South Asian culture of excellence, right? We do have this idea that, we have to be the best at everything because that's how we win, right? That's how we win at life.
yeah,
Then you layer in the model minority myth. Then you layer in socioeconomic things, right? Like the more you layer it, the more foundational this belief becomes that we
mm.
have to keep moving and doing and achieving in order to be valued, right? And then that just locks in.
Yeah. And let me ask something about that. I mean, of course, immigrants and this incredible backstory for many, many folks in the diaspora becomes signature in a way and maybe makes people prone to this kind of behavior. And then is it important in some ways to not fool yourself into separating out pride with that? On the one hand, of course, you don't want to necessarily have that drive everything about you, where it's a scarcity mindset, it's an urgency mindset, it's a excellence, at all costs.
Mhm.
And yet there is great pride also in what our achievements are as a community.
Yeah.
How do you kind of really sort of integrate those two together?
Yeah. So, the way I think about it, and this is kind of the argument I make in the book, is the opposite of toxic productivity is not the absence of productivity, it
Yeah.
is healthy
Yep.
productivity. So, when we think about pride in our achievements, we have to think about at what cost are we pursuing this achievement. And that's really the most important question for us to think about is there are seasons in your life where you really have to push through, right? Let's say you're an entrepreneur, you're raising around, like, yes, you have to push through. However, even in that period, even that very tight period of like heavy deadlines, if you don't prioritize rest, it's going to affect your bottom line eventually,
Of
right?
course.
So
Yeah.
again, it's like thinking about, at what cost am I pursuing this achievement, and how am I getting in my own way? How is my desire for pride getting in my own way of achieving things in a sustainable manner? So for
Mm.
me, we want to make our productivity sustainable. We want to make it something that is constantly kind of going through instead of something that goes up and down, ebbs and flows, where we push ourselves, then we burn out, then we push ourselves, then we burn out. There's nothing wrong with feeling pride or wanting to be high achieving. That's definitely something I want to clarify, and I want people to realize that it's really important that we feel good about the things that we do. But when
Mm.
we overdo it, we stop feeling good about it. We just feel
Yeah.
like we have to do it. We should do it. We must do it. And then it becomes a very joyless experience.
I love that there's this great, I think, reminder to redefine and in some ways, at least for me personally, constantly remind myself that the should part is always relative, right? I mean
Mm,
that should voice
mhm.
is something to maybe quiet down as well.
Yeah.
And in the book, I imagine there's a lot. I know there's a lot about managing trigger words, trigger emotions, whether that's shame or guilt or perfectionism. And why do you think those emotions and triggers are at the core of this sort of toxic and unhealthy productivity? I'm going to make you wear your therapist hat for a
Yeah.
second. And
Yeah.
these are really all swirls, and they're not necessarily always kind of siloed out. But why are those so important to really call out and really recognize and try and manage?
One of the reasons that's so important is because those intense emotions are often connected to core emotional needs. And these are like our biological drivers for connection, for acceptance, for love, for respect. These are things that are kind of hard coded in us. And so these emotions such as guilt, shame, they really activate a primal fear of being rejected by the group, by your in group, right? Whether it's your family, your peers. And so what happens is the mechanics and the dynamics are so deep inside us that we don't realize that they are now in the driver's seat. And that's why I think most of the productivity literature is focused on habit changes. It's that how can you
Mm,
have like optimize your habit changes? And even we've been talking about that, right? Because that's the most tangible impact we can make. However,
right.
if the emotional dynamics are still moving in the space of fear, shame, guilt, comparing yourself to others, not feeling good enough, you can make the habit changes and they'll last, but eventually your primal fears will take over. And those are
Mm,
really hard to
yeah.
talk yourself out of if you don't even know what's driving it. And so, thinking about what is the core emotional need that I am trying to fulfill as I pursue achievement at all costs will really help you start to deconstruct it. And this
Yeah.
foundation is laid so early on. A European
Sure.
pediatrician, like you probably see this all the time.
Yeah.
Parents unknowingly can use shame as a weapon against their children. Like they don't even mean to, right? Um, Especially in South Asian culture, comparison is a parenting technique, right?
Yeah.
Like look at
Yeah.
those people's children, look at that person's
Right.
kid, and what are they going to say about this? And I know this because I heard this a lot, and it instills this fear that I will not be accepted by my parents if I am not
It,
good.
It's striking
Yeah.
how much both toxic stressors and adverse childhood experiences are so woven into,
Totally.
what we do as adults.
Yeah.
And also as important are those great accelerators when you have sort of the opposites of those. Those are also really apparent when you see adults who don't have all those kind of core problematic triggers
Hmm.
that are there as well.
Yeah.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Israa Nasir. Stay tuned. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, this is Vidya Balan, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hi, this is Madhuri Dixit.
Hi, this is Farhan Akhtar.
Hi, I'm Lily Singh, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Hi there, I'm Abhay Dandekar, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with author of the new book, Toxic Productivity, Israa Nasir. One thing that it made me think of is, you talk about these sort of core emotions, and it's always a work in progress, of course, but I'm curious for you whether there were some moments of reckoning that kind of helped you to redefine your own relationship with productivity.
Yes, there were two really powerful ones, and I talk about it in the book as well. But one is, I'm a therapist. I've been a therapist for 10 years. And so the assumptions people make about therapists is that, we have it all figured out in our own heads. But it was
Right.
really, it was really like 4 years ago when I first recognized the shame I have around achievement
Yeah.
behaviors and the shame, how shame operates for me. It's just something I just was not aware of. And I am a fairly self-aware person, but I never transitioned into recognizing that. And it really took a incident at work where there was a little bit of like kind of like a racialized experience that I was on the receiving
Hmm.
end of, and I just completely was frozen. Like my freeze response completely
Yeah.
got activated. And in deconstructing that moment with my therapist over the next few months of like, it was my first racialized encounter as well. So I'd never
Sure.
been on the receiving end of this kind of stuff, especially in the workplace. And so
Yeah.
in deconstructing that, that's when we kind of got to the place where I was like, wait, I operate from a lot of shame around being good enough, and then I
Yep.
realized that I was always the good student, the good daughter. Teachers loved me, my parents, like I was like, the child they didn't really worry that much about when it came to academics and stuff.
Are you an oldest child, by the way?
No, I'm the oldest daughter. I'm the middle
Yeah.
child. And I was just like temperamentally a little, just a chill kid. And I like to read a lot. And so I feel like that kind of transforms the way parents react to you. And so that was one incident that I was like, oh wow, like this is why part of why I overwork myself, and it distresses me so much. And so that was one really big one. And the second is I found a journal entry from when I was like 20 while I was doing research for the book, and I was kind of going through my own things. And the journal entry was so sad. It was, I think I wrote down the sentence, in stillness is death, stagnant
Mm,
waters hold no value. And I must have been 21. And I would just kind of felt sad for my younger self, who really just had such an antagonistic view on rest.
sure.
And then I think
Yeah.
about all the decisions I made in my 20s, which some of them are so amazing and fun, and it got me great outcomes. But, I think I did struggle with burnout for a long time.
Of course. And reading that itself, right? Coming to that moment of reckoning, that sort of aha moment. I wonder if in writing the book and in having this kind of our expression so that you can address both of those
Mm.
kind of moments of reckoning. Was there a catharsis with this process for you that sort of allowed you the space, the template playbook almost to really address both of those concerns or both those incidents, I guess?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of like acceptance and awareness. Like I think I
Yeah,
learned a lot about myself, and the book is not particularly a very personal book. Like there's definitely a lot of me in there and lots of
sure.
client like amalgamations. But it's because it's not a memoir, it's not supremely personal, but I
Yeah,
definitely think that I can catch myself when I'm doing the emotional dynamic that is harmful. Like at least I can
yeah,
kind of name it. So I kind of have this like observational like an aerial view of myself. So I can definitely
yeah. The
catch
the
my
drone view of Isra.
yes, the drone view of me. Yeah. And I think there was like an acceptance to it. Like I was like, okay, like
Yeah,
this is how I'm operating and I don't want to operate like this anymore.
yeah,
And the one thing I do want to say and I want people to kind of know this is when we think about productivity and achievement behavior, we often think of the archetype as the type A person. I'm a type B person. And I know it doesn't sound like that because I have all these habits in place now to kind of keep it structured. But type
sure.
B people can also struggle with productivity, like
Hmm.
toxic productivity. It looks like avoidance behaviors. It looks like procrastination. It looks like a lot of overthinking, analysis paralysis. So
Yeah.
it's not just that people who are very type A are struggling, it's really anybody who has a connection between their self worth and their achievements can struggle with toxic productivity.
I wonder about, and this is sort of a thought that just popped into my
Yeah.
head, that it's a kind of a question that's steeped in some kind of circular irony, but
Mhm.
there's this kind of mirrored harmony of achievements, whether you're type A or type B, and this mirrored harmony of achievements and productivity that's itself involved in writing and publishing a book,
Hmm.
and maybe recognizing the strategy and the exercises involved to make that process peaceful and non-toxic
Mhm.
are itself, I don't know if that makes sense, but itself the substrate for how you are really going through and practicing the things that I'm sure are in the book itself. Did you find some struggle with that in saying, hey, I have deadlines, I have, making a book is no joke in 2024?
No, my goodness. No, it's certainly not. And so absolutely. When I started the book, I approached it with a very toxic productivity mindset. I was like, I'm going to finish this
Yeah,
manuscript in 10 months. Like it
right,
literally
of
took me
course.
24 months actually, like
Right.
April to April. But yeah, so I definitely and I share some of these stories in the book itself where I taught it's kind of like a meta awareness. Like I'm
Yeah,
actually writing about the toxic productivity stuff that I'm struggling with as I write the book.
right, right.
And I was having dinner with a friend a couple of months ago near the close to the end of the book. And she was kind of asking me how I'm doing. And I was just kind of like rambling on about like all the other things that I was doing besides writing the book because I was
Right.
consulting, I was working as a therapist, I'd make digital content, I do workshops for corporations. And she stopped me mid sentence and she said, "Are you struggling with toxic productivity?" And I was so
Right.
embarrassed and we laughed about it. And so yes, so there was a little bit of like a meta experience
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I didn't start writing this book after I figured it all out. Figured it out a little bit near the second half of the book
Yeah.
where I was like, "Oh, these are things I'm doing right now." And the slow mornings really came out of that. Now to kind of tie back to the
Yeah.
beginning, the slow mornings
Right.
came out of that because I was having a lot of writer's block. And I was
Yeah.
realizing that I'm having writer's block when I'm cramming my schedule, when I'm just getting
Mm.
up and running to my call, like opening up my laptop and doing too many things. And so in the book I talk about strategies of streamlining your calendar so you can actually do the things that align with you and that has more sustainability versus doing the things that you should be doing. And when you have to do the things you should be doing like deadlines, how can you find
Yeah.
purpose in that? How can you transform that so that it can be meaningful?
I've read and seen lots of content related back to these like sort of hacks, right? That you're trying to, maximize things and become more efficient. But is that just a mask for actually seeking more and more productivity in the end?
The how.
And I ask this because I'm at a stage where I'm actually, I'm actually wanting to shed
Mm.
tasks, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I want to let go more, and I don't feel guilty about that, but am I just fooling myself and masking this toxic productivity with trying to become more efficient? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I'm going to solicit some free mental health advice here.
I love this question because it's a really common one. One of the core
Yeah.
tenets of toxic productivity is the mask of efficiency, for sure,
Yeah.
right? The way it becomes healthy is if you are using the efficiency to clear up time, not so that you can put more things in. Right. So
Right.
being really intentional about the tasks, the commitments, and not just in work, but your personal life. I mean, you said that you have children, right?
I do. I have a 20-year-old and a
Yeah, so
17-year-old.
when they're younger, a lot of times parents like kind of slam the schedules with like 14 different after school things without realizing
Yes.
that that's a commitment to them as well. Right? So it's
Right.
like being intentional. Am I being efficient so I can squeeze more things in? Or am I being efficient so I can make gaps in my calendar? And am I being
Yeah.
efficient so that I'm doing the thing that is aligned with my values, that will give me the outcome that will make me happy, not the
Mm.
outcome that will check a box. Right. And so
Right.
it's kind of being
Right.
intentional about that. I don't think the hacks are necessarily harmful, but
Mm.
if you're approaching it from the mindset of needing to do more so you can feel good about yourself, then that does become harmful.
Let me ask you this. I mean, we're speaking with a common thread of having South Asian backgrounds and heritages,
Yeah.
and are there specific conversations that we kind of should be having in this global South Asian community with all the things that we've mentioned here,
Mhm.
but particularly about steering toward that healthy productivity?
Yeah.
How do we? I mean, we can do this as individuals. How do we do this as a collective?
So I think two things need to shift. This is just my perspective.
Yeah.
The one cultural shift that needs to happen for us as South Asians is we need to step away from the timeline. We are very timeline oriented people, which is kind of ironic because we're never on time. Like Brown Standard Time is a thing, and I have a
Right.
lot of endearment for a lot of things in our culture,
Yeah.
but we are very timeline oriented, right? I remember my mom telling me that I should try to finish undergrad like 1 year early for no reason,
Right.
just
Right.
just for
Yeah.
for the sake of doing it, right? I
Yeah.
took a gap year in the middle between undergrad and master's, and that was like a very foreign thing to my mom. She was like, What are you doing?
Right. What are you doing?
What are you
Right.
doing? Why is this happening?"
Yeah.
So this timeline thing, then like, undergrad, master's, job, marriage, house, first kid, second, right? Like we constantly
Children. Right.
move through this.
Yep.
So we need to step away from that because that really locks in well with the toxic productivity mindset. It's like the
Yeah.
prime background for that to develop because that activates shame. That activates the
Sure.
fear of being kicked out of your community or being rejected from the people who love you and that kind of stuff. The second shift that we need to make is kind of connected to the first one is we need to open ourselves up to non-traditional lifestyles, non-traditional
Yeah.
paths of living because the pressure eases a little bit. And this is within the
Sure.
context of South Asians, right? So when I was growing up, like you had four careers, right? And I'm not even being
Right.
stereotypical, you were either an engineer, a lawyer, something in medicine, or teaching
Sure.
type of jobs, right? But now I'm seeing this new outcrop of younger Gen Alpha, Gen Z South Asians who are pursuing non-traditional paths, right? They
Yeah.
are pursuing creative arts and they are pursuing entrepreneurship, and I think
Literally
even
everything.
even not
Yeah.
having children, not getting
Yeah.
married, right? I think all of that will shift our cultural mindset of needing to be a certain way so that we can achieve, achieve, achieve. The way that
Mm.
happens is very slow. It's
Yeah.
generational. I'm seeing millennial South Asian parents redo or sorry, break through the cycles, change some of their parenting habits. I think that is one way. And the second way is like if you're not a parent or you won't be a parent, is to talk about it. So
Yeah.
that's something that
Yeah.
I like as a therapist, that's my niche. I work with predominantly Asian, children of immigrants who are in life transition or who are choosing non-traditional life paths. So empowering people to talk about it, give it language, help them navigate setting boundaries that are appropriate to our culture, right? Help them
Yeah.
navigate finding community. And I think that is something that is really important. We need champions from within our community who talk about it. So one of the things I
I
talk
love
about
that.
a lot, this is a little bit of a personal thing, is like, I'm choosing not to have kids. As a Muslim
Yeah.
Pakistani person, that is like probably the
Right.
saddest thing and for my mom.
I know, and that itself is so sad, right? That
Yeah,
like that has to be a strange conversation as
for sure.
opposed to something we
Yeah,
celebrate and accept.
yeah.
And I think you're right. Like getting rid of timelines, having more dialogue, having more
Mhm,
conversation is huge. And
mhm.
you mentioned the word boundary, and I'll try and get you out of here on this
Sure.
one. In the end, I imagine that we save a lot of energy if we were just more content
Mm,
and more
mhm,
conscious
mhm.
of boundaries at any given time. And I imagine that helps us to stay healthy and to stay, in harmony in a way. So what do you do both to be at peace with these boundaries, to be content, but again, also satisfy and be empathic to those in different generations
Mm,
with different
mhm.
mindsets who are making their way towards being content, making their way towards changing those boundaries. And how do we, again, find a way to sort of connect the dots here so that we can eliminate, some of the barriers to making those boundaries? If that's a weird way to put that, but
Yeah.
hopefully that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I'll try to answer from the way I understood your question. I
Yeah.
think when we think about setting boundaries in our communities around this type of stuff, right? Like achievement, career paths, stuff like that. The notion is that it needs to be this like statement. I need to like put up this wall and now I'm just stating this and you have to accept it. And how you accept it is your problem. That's not the way to do it. We have to
Mm,
build relational boundaries because we are constantly in relation because our culture is collectivist, right? And so,
yeah.
barring abusive power dynamics, like this is not for that situation, is having your boundaries in dialogue. So, really understanding where your parents are coming from or where your grandparents are coming from. Like, why is this so hard for them to accept? What are their fears? Like, as parents, like, irrespective of culture, parents are just afraid something bad will happen to their kids, right? That's just the
Right.
core fear, and that manifests as not accepting interracial marriages, that
Yeah.
manifests as not accepting like your queer children. But the core in there is that they're afraid. They're afraid something
Yeah.
bad will happen. And so trying to access that piece, trying to understand where your parents are coming from when they are having a hard time with a choice that you're making, and continuously having an open dialogue with them. So the way I did it, especially in trying to help my mom understand my choices, is first understand where she was coming from. What were her fears? Why did she feel this way? What were the misconceptions? That was one conversation. Then there was another conversation about like another thing, right? Like, so we had these like actually a year of conversations. And in
Mm,
that year, trying as the child try to understand that I'm going to be in exploration phase, so I'm not going to take their stuff personally. Whatever they feel about this choice is an outcome of the way that they were raised. It doesn't have
sure.
anything to do with me. And that is a journey that you have to take in accepting that your parents will be disappointed in you. When you get over the fear that your parents will be disappointed in you, you can set the boundary in a healthy way without kind of jeopardizing the relationship. So we have a
Yeah.
great relationship, even though my mom fully does not agree with my choice, right?
Right.
But I talk to her literally 4 times a day, and she lives in Toronto. So
Yeah.
I think it's that piece in understanding where they're coming from and just making sure that their opinions doesn't impact your decisions and not taking their things personally. And that's if you have the privilege of having these conversations, I understand.
Sure.
If you
Yeah.
don't have the privilege of having these conversations, I think it's much harder. You have to have the conversation differently. Sometimes you need to create a little bit of space between whether you talk to them about it, whether you bring it up, you limit certain conversation topics. But the work of accepting that your parents will be disappointed in you is internal. And we have to do it ourselves with our therapists, with our journals. And it's very hard, for sure. As a
Yeah.
recovering good
Yeah.
girl, I can tell you that. Um, so yeah, it's I could talk about this forever. Like, I love this conversation.
Well, I was going to say, understanding where people are coming from and tackling toxic productivity and really developing great dialogue about all these things. Israa, thank you so much for joining us. This was really a treat, and I hope we can visit with you again down the line.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Your questions were very insightful.
Thanks so much, Israa. Please check out her book, Toxic Productivity, and go to israanasir.com to learn more. Shout out to Sharmila and Michael on getting hitched, and to Kamala Devi Harris for fighting the good fight. Till next time, I'm Abhay Darndekar.